Good evening, and thank you once again for joining us on our 9 o'clock hour of Nightline. And we have a great guest here tonight. His name is Christopher Zalusky, and his topic is Theirs is the Kingdom tonight. So I'm going to let Toni read a little synopsis about him, and then we're going to show a video, and I know you're going to just want to stay right where you are because this is going to be very good tonight.
Well, I wanted to share a little bit about what this documentary is about. I'll just read it. It says, from the Sistine Chapel to the Da Vinci's Last Supper, fresco paintings are one of the oldest and most durable forms of artwork known to man. As natural pigment is blended with wet plaster, the painting literally turns to stone, and the stories told in fresco paintings are preserved for centuries. But what do we do with the preserved stories, and what do they say about society's beliefs and priorities? At the intersection of faith and art, Theirs is the Kingdom is a feature-length documentary that follows the rare creation of a contemporary fresco mural by Christopher Holt inside the sanctuary of a small church in Asheville, North Carolina. This is a painting not of the rich and powerful, but of people battling homelessness, addiction, and mental illness. From the first sketch to the final brushstroke, the viewer witnesses the difficulties of this ancient artistic technique while also meeting an ensemble of cast-rich and complex characters. Unlike historical fresco paintings that depict traditional religious figures or powerful political icons, this painting features individuals on the fringes of society whose stories are often marginalized and forgotten. Yes. I know that you're going to enjoy this. We wanted to share a trailer of Theirs is the Kingdom with you guys so you can have a little bit of an idea of what this documentary is about and kind of get your eyes on the heart behind it. So check out this video for Theirs is the Kingdom.
I didn't feel like I was ever accepted by the world in a way that, or loved in a way that a person should be. And how all of a sudden now I'm going to be immortalized in a painting. I don't think one can ever come completely to grips with that.
Painting contemporary frescoes is extremely rare. How many frescoes are painted a year in the world? In the kind of the old process, in the kind of the old Renaissance style process that we're going to follow, then none.
There is something about looking at another human being that requires acknowledging their dignity. That's what I hear overwhelmingly from folks in poverty again and again and again. That's the most painful part. That's the most dehumanizing part, that if I don't look at you, it means that I really don't think you're a human being. And so here we are at a fresco saying, these are the people we need to look at to most.
I'm very interested in this tonight. We have our guest tonight, Christopher Zalusky. I'm going to read a bio on him, and then we're going to go and interview him. Christopher Zalusky is an award-winning documentary filmmaker. He's a journalist and an assistant professor at Wake Forest University's documentary film program. Prior to entering the world of documentary film, Zalusky worked as a newspaper reporter and multimedia producer at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch and the Roanoke Times. He has also worked in a nonprofit communications as the video director at Teach for America. His creative work has earned recognition from numerous organizations, including the Online News Association and the Academy of Television Arts and Sciences. Theirs is the Kingdom is his feature-length debut. Let's welcome him again here tonight.
Thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, tell us a little bit, how did you get connected with Haywood Street and the frescoes?
Yeah, so I was living in Asheville at the time, and it was actually the subject of mine from a previous documentary who told me about this church that was painting a fresco mural in their sanctuary. And I thought that was kind of a crazy thing. You don't really hear too much about frescoes anymore. I mean, most people think of you mentioned it in the intro, the Sistine Chapel, or, these older forms of artwork. And so I went to hear the pastor, Reverend Brian Combs, talk about the project, what it meant to him, what he thought it meant to the church. And I was immediately sucked in. And it was just, meeting the folks who were depicted in the painting, meeting the artist, Christopher Holt, and then talking more with the pastor, Reverend Combs. What started in my mind as maybe a short film ended up being a 3-year project. And the more I met people, the more I kept following, and it just kind of snowballed.
Wow. Now, in your letter from the filmmaker, you write, listening to other stories has changed your mindset and approach to filmmaking, community, and religion. Can you share about the process's change and how your outlook and approach are different now?
Yeah, sure. Well, as you said, I did come from the world of journalism before I got into documentary film. And so when I go to a shoot, I have a list of questions, I have my agenda, I have everything kind of how I like it. But this project was a little bit different in that I would be sitting with the artist, Christopher Holt, and the models whom he was sketching for, sometimes 2-3 hours. And I just had the camera rolling, and I would just, let folks share their stories. And so it was from a filmmaking standpoint, it was a really powerful experience to just let people tell their own stories and not try to dictate the scene so much. From a religion side of, I was raised Catholic, but when I left high school and went to college, I went to Appalachian State. I stopped going to church, and I don't know, I was still kind of questioning a lot of things, and I think most people are to a certain extent. But when I discovered this topic, one thing that Haywood Street does that really resonated with me is this idea of faith through action. I mean, they have a ton of different ministries that are happening in their church. The fresco is one such ministry, but the welcome table, the clothing closet, the art room. I mean, there's so many things that are happening there, and it just really spoke to me in a way that I hadn't really thought about faith in that way in a long time. And so, yeah, it certainly changed my perception of religion in that way as well.
Well, how did you approach stewarding all of these stories well and putting them together with, you have the Haywood Street congregation, you have the homeless people in the streets of Asheville, and then you have the artist, Christopher Holt. How did you steward all of those stories well?
Yeah, I mean, it's a process. I mean, there's a lot of iterations to try to get to the version that, we're at now as the final version. But I mean, originally, the artistic process was what really drew me into the story. I thought it was really interesting that Western North Carolina has this rich history of contemporary frescoes, and Christopher is kind of carrying on that lineage. And so I started following this fresco thinking, I'm really going to tell the story of the artwork. And then as I met more people who were actually being depicted in the artwork, and they just have really powerful, heartbreaking, hopeful stories, then I started thinking, okay, we need to weave these two together. And then kind of the last part that I thought was necessary was kind of the theology of Haywood Street. Why this painting is important, what it symbolizes. And so, yeah, I don't have a great answer for how it all weaves together. It's just in the editing room, it's a long process to, try to do something and then try to overcompensate and bring it back. And it's constantly, weaving it together and showing others. And so I say the short answer to your question is just a lot of time.
Yeah.
What do you think was most challenging part of the filmmaking and then the storytelling process?
Well, finding that balance I thought was difficult. We wanted to create a film that would speak to a lot of different audiences, and we feel we did that. I mean, we had a pretty successful film festival run in 2021, and then this year we've had a big screening on PBS in April, and we've done a lot of small kind of grassroots screenings at individual churches and places. And so striking that balance so that I think, when you make a film, or make any art really, half of the work for how that art is received is done by the viewer. It's done by the person who's watching, who's listening, who's looking at the artwork. And so, knowing that, we're trying to create something that is going to impact somebody no matter where they're coming from, whether they're a person of faith, whether they know anything about Asheville, whether they know anything about artwork. And so that was difficult. We want to make sure we're including enough relevant details that we're doing justice to the story, but we're not getting bogged down, in one of those storylines so much that it's turning some people away. And so that was a tough part. And I just think, a big part of this filmmaking process that didn't happen in any of my previous films was COVID. And so being in the basement for 2020 and editing this project, in a vacuum, that was difficult too. But, I think we made the best of it.
Have you seen any other challenges with the film now that it's, out there for a wider audience? And also, what's been the most surprising as you've shared this film with others?
Well, I don't know how much it's been a challenge other than just the challenge of trying to get a film or a song or a piece of art or anything out into the world now is difficult because...
Well, maybe to twist that question a little,
yeah.
With it being depicting the homeless, what's been the feedback that you've heard on that? Like how were the homeless chosen? How did they feel about this being a painting about them, and maybe other people that you've heard from just depicting that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's 30 people depicted in the actual mural, and so it's a big mural. It's 20 feet long, 10 feet tall. Actually, I'm sorry, it's almost 30 feet long, 10 feet tall. And so there's 30 people that are actually depicted in the mural, and there's about 11 in the film. And I say that because when the artist, Christopher Holt, would approach people about being in the painting, a lot of people, and I think that most people would have this response is no, I don't want to do that. That seems, way too invasive. And so adding another layer on top of that was then I would come in after they agreed to be part of the painting, and I'd say, well, now I want to tell your story on camera. And so I say this to say that there was the whole process, both with making the painting and making the documentary, involved gaining people's trust and making sure that people felt comfortable around us and they knew what we were trying to do with the project. And so that was a challenge, I think, probably more than other films that I've worked on, in trying to gain folks' trust and getting them to feel comfortable with us. But I will say that since they've seen the film, the folks that are in the film, the response has been, overwhelmingly positive, which is incredibly important to me, and it means a lot to me, because I would hate to do something where, I've created something where the folks who are actually in the film don't feel that it, accurately represents Haywood Street or represents their story. And then in terms of just, the general audience who's seen it so far, we've been really encouraged by the response from all sorts of folks. Everybody seems to kind of, like I said earlier, take something different with them after they see it. So so far we've been really excited about the response.
Well, it sounds super interesting. And I'm sure that even these people who are homeless, like someone wanting to even speak with them, first yes. a painting of them, and then ask them their story, because like the video said, a lot of people just don't look, because if you don't look, they're not there. And so just to make them feel seen and known and heard, I'm sure brought just hope to yes. their life. And because we don't know their story, we don't know what got them to the place they're in. And so it's really cool that you guys have been able to share their story like that.
Yeah, thank you.
We're going to come back and continue to talk to you. We're going to have Tanya Duncan sing Through the Fire, and then we're going to be back to talk more.
certain circumstances and things I could not understand. And many times in trials, weakness blurs my vision. That's when my frustration gets so out of hand. But it's then I am reminded that I've never been forsaken, and I've never had to stand one test alone, no. And then I look at all my victories, and the Spirit rises up in me, and it's through the fire my weakness is made strong. Oh, yes. He never promised that the cross would not get heavy, and the hill would not be hard to climb. He never offered our victories without fighting, but he said no, we'll always come in time. Just remember when you're standing in the valley of decision, and the adversary says, give in. Just hold on. My God will show up, and he will take you through the fire again. I know he will. Now I know within myself that I will surely perish. But if I trust the hand of God, I know he'll shield the flames again, again. He never promised that the cross would not get heavy, and the hill would not be hard to climb. Oh, he never offered our victories without fighting, but he said no, we'll always come in time. Just remember when you're standing in the valley of decision, and the adversary says, give in. Just hold on. My God will show up every time, and he will take you through the fire again. Just hold on. My God will show up, and he will take you through the fire again and again. He's always with you. You gotta hold on, never give in. Oh, cling to him. He'll never, never let you go.
Well, we're back with Christopher Zaleski. He is here sharing about the documentary, Theirs is the Kingdom.
Yes.
And Christopher, we were talking about all of these people that are in the painting. I think you said about 30 different people.
Yeah.
And they're all homeless people on the streets of Asheville, and talking about making them feel seen and heard. Was that something that was important to you in making sure that their story was told well in this documentary?
Yeah, I mean, it was probably one of the main things that drew me into the story. When I first heard Reverend Brian Combs talk about the fresco, he says that there's something about looking at another human being that gives them their dignity. That if I don't look at you, it means that I don't think that you're a human being. And how that experience is far too common for people who are on the streets, that are on the street corner, that people are averting their eyes, they're not making eye contact. And so here, this artwork is taking that idea that here are folks on the margins of society that are not seen, and now they're being put into a fresco life size, some of them larger than life. And so it's all about being seen. And then you add the other layer to that is what makes fresco art so unique is that instead of painting, a paint onto canvas, you're painting into a wet plaster. And so the paint is actually sucked into the wall. It becomes the wall. So there's a real permanence to fresco painting. And so both of those things became such an important part of the fresco and a part of the film, just this idea of being seen, being permanently seen, and what that does to people as they walk into the sanctuary to see this large mural and kind of the effect it has on people.
I think that's beautiful. And like you said, for them to be permanent and for people to be able to walk in and now look at them and, even take away that thought of like, I'm not going to look like they're people, they have a story and they need to be seen and heard as well. Is there one person's story that resonated with you that really just stuck out?
Oh man, so there's 11 of the models in the painting that are shown in the film, and each one has, kind of a special place, I guess we could say. But I would say the one person I'll comment on here today was Jeanette, who's one of the seminal figures in the actual painting. She's on the right-hand side. She's holding a torch, which is symbolic of her place in Haywood Street. But when I talked with her, she was one of the earlier interviews that I did. She talks about, she had lived on the streets and now she has stable housing, and she's a big part of the community at Haywood Street. And so she talks about seeing women come in with a bag of their clothes on one knee and a child on the other, and not knowing where they're going to sleep that night, and how she's able to relate to them. And she tells this story about one woman asking her, how would you know? You've never been homeless. And she says, oh, yes, I have. There's not a homeless look. You can't say who is homeless or who isn't, or what looks homeless and what doesn't. And that line to me kind of was the thesis statement of the film, so to say. I mean, that kind of represented what I wanted the film to get across, in that we're all struggling with something. And, we need to kind of reserve our judgment, open up our hearts, open up our minds, and be open to whatever it is that whatever experiences that we have. And I think that Jeanette says that so well, and that, there is not a homeless look. Like, a lot of people are suffering with this and battling this. And all we can do is continue to love one another and try to be as, walk as God would ask us to walk. I mean, walk as Jesus would ask us to walk. And so I think that her line is so powerful in that way.
Well, how do you balance being a professor and a filmmaker?
Yeah, I mean, some days are easier than others. I'm fortunate that, well, let me back up. I actually am fortunate that I teach in the same program that I got my master's from. And I am really fortunate for that. But one of the reasons I wanted to get into teaching in the first place was that my research is to make films. And so since I am in a more creative field, my research is creative research. And so I'm fortunate in that when I have to go do research, that means I have to go take the camera out and make films. And I love making films. And so this was a good way, I thought, to balance my desire to want to make films with having a steady income. I have 2 kids. I have a 5-year-old and a 4-year-old. I have a wife. And so I didn't want to just say, I'm going to New York or LA and trying this. I wanted to have something that felt, I don't know, that's not really me. And so this was just a good way to balance that, those 2 things. And I love teaching. My mom was a college professor, and so I was kind of around that. And so but to answer your question, some weeks, some months, it's easier to balance than others, for sure.
Yeah, I can take that. We've always balanced multiple things as well, and so there are some good weeks and some harder weeks.
Yeah.
Well, what's next for you? I know that this has been probably just refreshing to see this come to life finally. With Theirs is the Kingdom. What's next for you?
Yeah, so I mean, right now I'm still really focused on trying to get Theirs is the Kingdom out into the world, and you know, with different types of screenings and places like that. But the last couple films I've worked on have focused on artists. So I really like telling stories about artists and artwork. And so right now I'm starting to do some really early days type of research on folk artists in the South. And so we'll see. It's still too early to say specifically what I'm working on, but I want it to be focused in the South, and I want it to be focused on artwork.
Well, as you're continuing to promote Theirs is the Kingdom and tell these stories, how can people watch this documentary?
Sure. So right now it is streaming on Amazon, on Apple TV, on Google Play, available to rent on YouTube. And so it's on a lot of different streaming platforms. If you go to theirsisthekingdomfilm.com, we have a list of all the places that it's available there. And then I think I mentioned this a little while ago, but we had a really big PBS run in April where it aired on 83 or 84% of PBS stations. And so it's still doing that. And so I always tell folks to check their local listings. Like, I know it's airing on PBS North Carolina here in a couple days, and it was on South Carolina PBS in April. And so there's a chance that it'll be in your area, you know, on your local PBS station as well. But it's in a lot of places. If you are on Instagram and follow us, it's at Theirs is the Kingdom, and we usually post, you know, new screening updates on there as well.
Well, there's so many places to be able to check out Theirs is the Kingdom and be encouraged by these stories. I know that the Lord will use the stories of all of these people depicted in this fresco painting to touch your heart and many, many lives. So we would love for you to pray over our viewers. We have people that call in every night that need, they just have different prayer requests. And I know you've seen the lives of many who are hurting. So I'll just ask that you would just pray a prayer for those today that are hurting.
Sure. God, thank you for bringing us together here tonight and sharing the wonderful story of Haywood Street and this fresco. And I hope that it just lets people open their hearts and lets us, you know, love one another and not judge each other and understand that we're all struggling, but we could use each other to lift us up. And that's really the powerful thing that I hope people get from tonight. So thank you for bringing us together here. In your name we pray. Amen.